Hello and welcome to the MedTech Wealth Advisor podcast with your host, Matt Nelson. Matt, good to be with you again. How are you?
Excellent. Doing really well.
That's
Getting
good
ready
to
for
know.
spring here.
Yeah, well, I've been ready for spring since Christmas. So
Yes.
I'm not a good gauge for this. Your guest today, however, doesn't have to worry about spring because he lives in the land I think of as eternal spring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm paying for it out here though.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
That's right. Well, hey Bill, I wanted to have this guest on today. His name's Omar Khateeb. And I wanted to basically take a break from all the sort of personal finance discussions we've been having and taxes and investing and just all the stuff and really um hear from an industry leader. This is something I've been planning to do for a while. Listeners of the show know we're still fresh into it. We're still in our first season, but um, I look, I can, I I was introduced to Omar through his podcast, a little over a year ago. I kind of remember, I remember the day even I was like scrolling through my podcasts, like what can I listen to on MedTech? Fill the time, come across this podcast, and it literally kind of a light switched on for me. This is a couple of years ago, I guess now, and I thought, wow, this industry is awesome. I really need to learn more about this. And I literally, Omar, I don't know if you knew this, but I actually switched the podcast to play oldest and newest because I'm like, I gotta listen to everything. So I started off at the beginning for you. And
No,
and
I
I
did
said to
not know
myself,
that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's the best compliment you gave me. I appreciate
I said to myself, I'm going to have this guy on a podcast someday. I didn't even have a podcast yet. I'm just like, look, I'm going to have a podcast. I'm going to have this guy on. He's going to be the first guest. And here we are, first outside guest. So I'm super, super excited to have you on, Omar.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on. I'm very happy and super excited for you. I know when we first talked about you starting the podcast and everything, so it's great to see that you're doing it. You're getting Bill's help. I've seen it online. It looks great, sounds great, and so congratulations. And yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, that's very good. Well, just a little bit extra kind of intro. I wanted to give you some more accolades. Look, we're gonna hear about your background a little bit, but I can tell, just from the few short years you've kind of pushed off in your podcast, it's just gone to be a wildly successful. You're now up to something like 153 or 154 episodes out, at least that are published. I know you've transitioned to an industry paid, speaker, consultant, just it's a pretty interesting story. So I want to get into that. And by the way, I think I picked up somewhere along the way, you even pushed into the world of like blockchain and NFTs. So that's kind of a
Man,
funny.
that's a blast from the past. But yes, I did dabble in that area. I mean, I've been hodl for since 2017 with crypto and Bitcoin. But yes, in a very funny way, like myself, the Mad Device Rep, our industry's most notorious meme maker, and Henry Peck, who's VP of Growth over at LSI, we officially launched the very first NFT project in the medtech space. Might be the only
Interesting.
one. I think there's some other ones, but we launched the very, very first one.
Yeah,
So
yeah, super interesting.
back when it was a thing.
Yeah, right, right. Well, so what I wanted to talk about today is really just, some of the listeners of our show may also be listening to your podcast too. So they may have heard your background, but not everybody will have. And so really just wanted to get a little bit of your origin story, how you started out in the medical field, how you pivoted to, device sales, and then how basically now you're more of an industry influencer and consultant. And so we'll get into that. But, as we go through the discussion, and I'm also really interested to hear about what your why is. Like, why did you do this? What are you trying to do in the industry? And the main point is like, the crossover here, I think for our listeners is, look, you could be kind of grinding it out in this industry that you love. You love the influence it's having, but maybe it's just not the best career fit. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of other paths besides just kind of funneling down to sales or an executive role. And so I want to hear a little bit about that too. So as we go through the conversation, we'll get into that. But why don't we just start off with a little bit of your background? Yeah, tell us your origin story.
Yeah, no, origin story. So I am a first generation American. My dad is a surgeon. He's from Iraq, from Baghdad, and my mom is Turkish, from Istanbul. She was a anatomy professor. So I was born and raised in the border town of El Paso, Texas. It's a remarkable city. People are amazing. I'm very, very proud about the city that I'm from. A lot of people say that, but I genuinely am. Um, I had a really great childhood growing up, two wonderful parents, a wonderful sister. And then I found my way to university. So I went to the University of Texas El Paso, studied biology and chemistry, honored in both of them. Like most people, I was a pre-med. Everybody's pre-med at some point in college, everybody. Not everybody follows through with it. So I actually followed through with it and I went to medical school. I went to medical school at Texas Tech University on a full academic scholarship. But a couple years in, I realized it was just not for me. It wasn't working out. And I decided to leave. And that was around 2011, 2012. And that's where I did door-to-door sales, working for a collection agency technology company called Transworld. But essentially, I was doing door-to-door sales. And then landed my first gig at the world's first robotic spine company. And if I can make a quick comment on that, at the time, I was dealing with a lot of recruiters, and they all told me the same thing, which is you don't really have any experience, even though I just came out of medical school. They're
Right.
like, you don't have any experience, and you're probably gonna have to start off at a small distributorship or selling disposables or something. No offense to people who do that. Um, but I just didn't believe that. And lo and behold, I not only landed a job in med device, but I landed it at the top of the heap. So, surgical robotics is really hard to get into now. It was even more difficult back then because back then you had maybe two or three companies in the entire world who did surgical robotics. So
And about what time was this roughly, just for
2012,
2012? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I joined, I was a sales rep for a year and a half. Then I went to marketing. I really focused on commercial marketing, which is, in my opinion, the kind of marketing that makes money.
Sure.
So too much marketing in our industry is product management, which is very important.
Yeah.
But marketing in my mind is when you're able to mold a market and uncover hidden desires of that market and channel it towards making money. And so
Mhm.
that's what I really focused on. My specialty is really early adopters, and so from there, I worked at a variety of other companies, AI, robotics, even software, mainly with the theme of new emerging technology that's really expensive and doesn't even have a market yet, right? So really tough stuff. And so I did that for a little over a decade. And then this is kind of sort of, I guess, the end of my intro here is, at the end of 2021, I left. I was at a software company and I left, and I was coming back to med device. So at that point, my stock was pretty hot. I was actually the very first person in the whole industry to do growth marketing. So I introduced that as a thing, back when nobody even knew what it was. So I was the first head of growth in our industry, first one to launch a podcast at a company, first one to, a lot of things. I was a huge speaker and writer about persuasion and using social media and stuff. So coming back, I had a lot of great offers. I felt nothing. And I just couldn't get excited, even though the money was great, equity, there's even one publicly traded company that I was talking with about potentially being their new VP of marketing. So it's a good stroke of the ego, but I just didn't feel excited, and I didn't feel, I just felt nothing. And my intuition just kind of was, I'm a big believer in intuition. And so it just kind of told me just, yeah, don't do any of this. And I think it was November, and I was talking to a friend of mine, PJ. So big shout out to PJ, who's a MedTech founder. He exited company. He's like, hey man, he's like, you've been going hard for years now. You haven't even taken a break. It's just one thing after another. He's like, why don't you take a break for 6 months or something and just consult? And I was like, yeah, I'll consult. And I was like, but wait, if I do that, that means I'll have a business. And I've never marketed myself. I've never gone hard at that because, being at companies, you have to be careful with that. You don't want to
Yeah.
eclipse the company you're at.
Right.
And unfortunately for me, because I'm pretty outspoken and I write and I make videos and everything, that was pretty easy for me to do at certain companies. Some companies loved it. Big shout out to Joe Urban and Acuren Medical, which was formerly Potrero, who really supported that and really like took. And there's, another company, which I won't mention, where the people were pretty petty and anything I did would seem to be wrong. But anyways, um, so I gave that some thought and I went to my wife and I was talking to her about it. She's like, yeah, you should do it. You should be an entrepreneur. And I was really worried because, this is the money show. So I know you said we're going to take a break from it. We're going to talk about money on this episode.
Sure.
I didn't have like much savings, you know. I
Yeah.
had like some investments and everything, but not like a savings account that had like, 6-month windfall under it.
Hmm.
And my wife was pregnant and she was just like, "No, look, like we'll be fine. Just do it." So the month of December was literally, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. How am I going to make money? How am I like
Yeah.
my wife's pregnant, like I don't have health insurance now. Like where do I get health insurance if I don't work for somebody, right? So that was for the first month. And the thing that I would tell people when it comes to making money, I think, I heard this from various people, but to get to your first million is more, you have to have a good product and service and everything, but it's really more mindset than anything. And so, I launched my company with a course that taught, which is still available. So if anybody's interested, you can go to khateebandco.com and look at the webinars. You can watch a webinar on it. Or just if you want to just join the course right away, it's called digitalmedicalsales.com. Matt, you went through it, and you've been crushing it on online. So like it's not just for med reps, the CEOs,
Right.
founders go through it all the time. So that was like the first year of my company was launching that course, teaching people how to sell using social media, how to drive product adoption. Um, and I think the big thing that happened, because I've started a company in the past. What was different this time was A, I had a baby on the way, but B, I burned the boat. Like literally burned the boats. Like when I went on it, it wasn't like, hey, let me try this for 6 months and see. It was a one-way
Right.
street, and I was like, this is it. I cannot go back. And
Yeah.
I kind of did it in a way that almost made me unemployable. Like, in a sense of like how much I marketed myself, how much I went. So, it was a one-way street. And so when that happens, you figure it out. And so I'll
Yeah.
kind of round out here and go come back to you. But what my company is now is, it's two-part. The podcast is a flywheel where I have a variety of people on the show. I'd love to have you on the show, by the way, because there's not enough talk about like finances and money.
Sure.
But the podcast is a flywheel to have investors on the show, early stage entrepreneurs, even physicians, for me to give back to the MedTech community because I want to make this industry great again. I'm sick and tired of seeing people talented people leave and either graduate college or just decide to go into big tech or software or something. But like, we create life-saving technology, not like
Right.
social media apps, right? So that's the podcast. And then my company has one mission, which is to change how we sell and market in this industry. We do that in a variety of ways. We work with startups to help them raise awareness with investors and raise money. And then the other side of it is we help companies commercialize their products. So companies like Moon Surgical, for example, is a client. They don't have a sales force, and so they engage my company to deploy social media and digital strategies to go outbound and market and sell their product to early adopters and get them to adopt it and create a category for them. So that's
Yeah.
that's essentially what I do now.
That's fantastic. There's so many things I want to unpack in there. That one, if you um looking back, what do you think it is that got you to this point where you seem to want to take a lot of risks? You seem to want to do a lot of firsts. You mentioned being a first in a lot of
Oh
areas.
yeah.
Is that a
No
father
one's really asked.
influence or what?
I think yeah, I guess I don't look at it as risk, although a lot of it is very risky. I think part of it is I don't like competing. I'm very competitive. I'm pretty aggressive, but I feel like if I'm doing something almost like somebody else, like it's just a loser's game. I have a great book. So as you know, I'm in my library, so I recommend books. Peter Thiel, who, oh, and here comes my lovely wife with coffee. It's amazing. Thank you. It's the best. So like Peter Thiel, for example, who, part of the PayPal mafia, and I think he knows the thing to do. He says it best. He's like, competition's for losers, right? And so my thing is like, if you look at, and it's more of a blue ocean strategy. If you look at the foundation, if you look at those pyramids, right? I'm really um, inspired by the pyramids in Egypt. That base of that pyramid is foundational. It's not moving anywhere. So what's the foundation of business? The foundation of any business is attention. If you can't get attention, you cannot persuade. If you can't persuade,
So
you can't
true.
sell, and you can't make money. Period.
So true.
Right. And so when it comes to getting attention, you can compete in a pool of other people doing similar things, and you just try and do it better, faster, crazier, more wild, right? Or you go over here where nobody is, and you do things your own way, and then you're able to garner a lot more attention. So even my podcast, yes, there are other podcasts. There's no podcast that's like mine at all.
Absolutely.
There's like medical sales podcasts. There's like MedTech investor there's no podcast like mine,
Yep.
And
I
so
can attest to that, by the way, not to interrupt you
thank
too
you.
much there, but I probably saved and downloaded as many podcasts that say med device in them as are out there. And I literally I listened to dozens of them. I listened to so many and thought, yeah, I mean, it's okay, but I can just crank through Omar, although, I got to put you on like speed and a half or two so I can just crank through it. But I
Yeah, some of the
just
episodes are
learned
pretty long, man.
I learned so much more from it. And it's just fun to hear you go kind of a far ranging topics and so forth. So that's
Absolutely.
super interesting.
And just I want to give a shout out. Uh, uh um, what's his name? Uh, I'll remember it. Zan Shake. Zan Shake. So I have a friend, Zan Shake, him and his brother, really successful entrepreneurs in the crypto world. And he said something many years ago, or 2 years ago, actually, in the mastermind that I'm in. And he said that the thing that'll get you to the next level tomorrow isn't the thing that you're doing today. Like you can't do what you did yesterday, just better and harder. Like you have to do radically
Right.
different things. So every year, my theme is like, what am I going to do this year that's radically different from last year? And that's kind of why, I survived my first year in business. The second year, even though I changed so much of the business model, like my revenue improved and everything. And so that's a big theme for me, which is every year, what's the thing? And so like as an example, like with the podcast, I try and look for themes. So like not just bigger guests, but like what are things that nobody's talking about? So like one of the themes of my show or series is exits. So it's like when we hear about these big exits, like it's like, oh, like XYZ company sold for $500 million or $1 billion. It's like, oh, that's great. But nobody really talks about how did you engineer that? Like
Sure.
what were the negotiations like? It's always in like, like over a dinner or something, you hear like the war stories. So I was like, I'm gonna get those stories. So, I've had some pretty amazing exits. Most recently, I had Mark McKenna, who was the CEO of Prometheus biotech company. They exited for $10.7 billion. So like hearing that, how he was, him and Prometheus were fighting against Pfizer, and what did they do to raise money, and how did they leverage that? What did they do in the markets, right? You
Yeah.
know,
That's
so it's always
fantastic.
about doing something different. So long answer, but that's why I like to do things that are different and riskier,
Love it. Love
you
it.
know?
That's fantastic. And by doing that, you just touched on something that's so valuable because, business can be lonely and, the success at the top
Oh
is
yeah.
difficult, right? And so, I think about founders that are like they get this great idea and they're trying to launch the next, not even next unicorn. They just want to like launch a company with some life-saving device, right? And it's hard to find information about it. And so just having someone like you to bring those war stories together and help them understand what they're going through and kind of get some positive energy from it. That's a far-reaching influence you have on the industry as a whole.
And I'll tell you something to motivate you more. I mean, you're sticking to your podcast, and now like you've been so public. Some people start a podcast and they're not public about it, so they let it die. You're public about it, so you have to stick to it.
Sure.
Something I don't hope it happens, but just based on statistics, it can happen. Um, for me on my show, it happened first with my mentor, but he had passed and I had a recording of him and I published it. But like a couple weeks ago, there's I won't mention because I don't know how public it is yet, but there is a really well-known, well-respected CEO came on my show over a year ago. Um, we had like an hour and a half, 2 hour episode. And, then I found out he had to step down for personal reasons. I didn't really know what was going on. And I get a message a couple weeks ago from his wife on Instagram saying, she's like, oh, I watched the episode of you guys, and you're both like stars and I love it. And she's like, I just wanted to reach out and let you know, like, we lost him. He passed away a couple
Wow.
weeks ago. And so this guy's got kids, and right now on the internet, there's one thing that exists of somebody's father,
Wow.
somebody's husband, somebody's son in long form talking. And I
Yeah,
just feel so grateful and honored that like I was able to capture that for his family and friends.
absolutely. You're a historian. It becomes a historian in that way.
Yeah, totally.
That's super great. I love it. I could go on this part of it for a while, but it just for time, I know you've got a super busy schedule. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your you mentioned some of the things you're doing in your business, but let's just talk a little bit more about it. So you've got this flywheel, this podcast flywheel, which 150 some odd episodes. I mean, that's a grind, man. That just sticking to it and pushing it.
Publish
And
3 times a week, man. It
yeah,
ain't
it's
no joke.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so that has led to a lot of industry consulting and coaching. You mentioned a couple of those things, but when you do that, are you mostly being sought out for social media influence, or is it sales training? What's your kind of niche there?
Yeah, I guess my niche is really persuasion using social media. So,
Okay.
on some sides, so I'm gonna like most things. I'm as you can tell, I'm brevity isn't my thing. I'm trying, it's when it's persuasion, brevity is my thing. But when it comes to talking,
Hmm.
so um, so it takes many forms. It could be my course. It could be a sales training where like a team goes through my course and maybe I coach them. It could be like in the highest level of my business or highest ticket thing is, company comes to me and says, we need your help because we need to sell and have a go-to-market strategy and we need somebody to execute it, right? And so last year, when it comes to my mission, change how we sell and market in the industry, but also my personal mission, which is like, I didn't start a business to replace my job, and make the same amount of money. I started a business to achieve financial freedom and do whatever I want, whenever I want, you
Right.
know? There's a window that I'm trying to break, right? Of, revenue, of, the mission, everything. So those offers I told you about, those are all like little pebbles. And something I tell entrepreneurs is if you're looking at a problem you're trying to solve, it's a window. Are the things you're throwing pebbles or are they bricks? So in my first couple years of business, a lot of things I was doing based on impact and revenue were like pebbles. Like, oh, like I'll coach you, take my course and everything.
Sure.
Good revenue, but I want to scale it. So I looked at it and I was like, all right, these are all pebbles. What's a brick? And the brick is company hires my company and we do all of it, literally. Like we do outbound sales and automation. We do demand generation where we work with the team on content, right? And we lay like kind of like those pyramids in Egypt. We help lay a solid foundation for
Sure.
success. You know,
That's fantastic. I've heard you talk about
It-
in earlier episodes how social media, and especially let's just say LinkedIn, was kind of it was a vague concept. Providers, let's just say an ortho surgeon was like, why do I want to be on LinkedIn and influence? And I think you've been influential in changing that. How much adoption are you seeing personally? And I just quick interject from my point of view outside the industry. I'm amazed as I start to connect with some of the providers, how, you've got surgeons putting out content almost daily
Oh
or at
yeah.
least weekly.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a lot. It's a lot, and there's a reason for that, psychologically. So one, it's patients are looking them up, so they have to have a presence and everything. But the unfortunate thing is that in medicine, unlike 10, 20 years ago, more than 50% of physicians now are employees. And so if you're an employee, you always want to have the opportunity to get new jobs and everything. And most physicians are realize I'm not going to make my money and retire just on my day job. So now they're looking for opportunities to consult, work with stars and everything. And so of all the platforms, LinkedIn is the most academic, the most professional. With the verification that Microsoft owns LinkedIn. And so now they're making people to use their real IDs or passports to verify their profiles. They're deleting So for all those reasons, they're on LinkedIn. And not everybody, not every physician is in a position academically or even financially where they can go and be on podium at a conference. But they still have things to say. So LinkedIn has become this outlet for a lot of private physicians to share, hey, here's how I'm using this technology, this tool, and then they're getting like crowdsourced knowledge from their peers. And so there's a lot. And last year for 6 months, I tracked those numbers across 20 different specialties. And the line graph for that in terms of adoption, and when I say adoption, I mean how many profiles are on LinkedIn and how many of them have posted in the last 30 days, which by the way is public on LinkedIn. You can search for this. It's just going up and to the right.
Wow.
So it's increasing.
Yeah.
And, in a world where access has gone away, and we've known this in this industry, it's more difficult to get in the hospital, you're competing with more things, etc. You know, social media and using digital channels, even email, right, is the key to win. Johnson Johnson did a study, well, I don't know, in the 80s that essentially in sales, like to sell somebody, you have to have 7 touch points. Well, you can get those 7 touch points accomplished within a period of 2 or 3 weeks without leaving your home. And so again, like if when it comes to business, right, I think it's
Yeah.
very important, and I'm not there yet. I'm getting better about it. I'm not a pro, but like every business operator needs to learn how to read a balance sheet, right? And so
Right.
part of that is that not only is it more effective, but it keeps your operating expenses low because like you know, travel expenses add up with a sales team when they're driving everywhere, they're staying in hotels and everything, and like for
Right.
what, like a 1 hour meeting in an office that may not happen.
Still not touching as many people as they could with the
Yeah,
right industry influence. Yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it obviously explains. It's a lot of um, forces coming together to explain why you're kind of the timing of you starting the business and the social media trends. It just all kind of converged, and yeah, it's been great. I love it. What will with your experience now, just in the industry in general, but especially with the podcast and being exposed to just all these different industry leaders and minds and career paths and so forth. If you're talking to an audience of, um, like our listeners, people in the industry, do you have any just advice on career paths in med tech? Maybe how to enter,
Oh,
um, directions you
yeah.
could go.
Oh, yeah. I definitely have some advice. This is dual advice for both like a career and for entrepreneurship. Um, Look for the most expensive and complicated problems to solve. If you want to
Hmm,
make more money, if you want to have like a great career, do that. So like when I had a career, I focused on really expensive medical technology, first of its kind, like robotics, AI, like that's really, really hard. That's
sure.
super hard. And then I focused more, even more so, and I don't believe in this too much, but then even more so, I'm like, okay, in the world of medicine, which specialties are the ones that bring in the most money for the hospital? So at the very top of the heap, no offense to the other specialties, you have spine surgeons, you have cardiothoracic surgeons, interventional cardiologists, right? So there's like a list of 5 or 6 of them, right? And so if you focus on solving the problem of the most expensive technology that's new and complicated and hard to sell and market and everything, and you're doing that to the most sought after people, you'll
Hmm.
make a great career. and that's essentially what I did in my career, and then that's pretty much what I did for my business. So for my business, I think it was last year after my first year, as 98, no, 95% of my revenue came from the course. Okay,
Sure.
and so I did great that year. But selling a course is like a B2C product, a business to consumer product. So like you have to run ads. It's hard to sustain a business if you're selling a niche course.
Right.
So I had to change. And so then in last year I was like, I need to solve more expensive problems. So I started solving more expensive and bigger problems. And then towards the end of last year, I was like, great, but I felt like I launched like, I don't know, like 10 different products and services last year. It's really exhausting, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so the theme before I started this year, I was like, okay, what's the most expensive, difficult problem I can solve?
Right.
And it kind of boils down to two things: uh, fundraising and commercializing a product,
Hmm.
right? Like that's it, you know. And then doing it as a white glove service where I'm like, hey, we'll do all of these things for you and take care of it.
Right.
Um, that's my advice to people.
That's interesting. It's akin
Go
to
towards
just
hard things.
go.
Like
Yeah. Go.
I feel like
Right.
in life, if you change your mindset and you find a way to attract yourself to doing really hard, difficult things, I think your life will turn out okay.
Yeah. I love it.
Like I
Yeah.
don't think anybody who does hard things is like unsuccessful. If you think of like the most disciplined people out there.
Right. Well, back to your analogy of throwing, what can you do that's like throwing a brick versus throwing a bunch of pebbles? I mean, it's much harder, um, doing that. But as you find that complicated, hard to solve problem and you become more and more niched at it, you obviously just get known better. Now, it feels risky probably because you're thinking, well, geez, now I gotta like not pay attention to my course and this revenue here, and I still got a mortgage to pay. And yet if you just niche down like you're doing, you become a sought after expert for maybe one thing. Like it might
Yeah.
just be one thing that Omar's known for.
That's exactly correct. And that I think is the staple and the foundation of business, which goes back to attention, which is, what are you known for? What are you the one of? So that the day that somebody has a problem, when somebody has the problem that I just described, there's no like I've never sent in my entire career, and it's 3 years long now, but like I've never sent a competing quote or been compared to somebody. It's just like we have XYZ problem, like, hey, we don't have a sales force or our sales force isn't doing well. We need to use digital. We don't know how. Who do we call?
Right.
We're going to
Yeah.
call Khateeb and Co. and Omar Khateeb.
Love it.
Like
I love it.
that's the goal, I think. And this is why I'm very excited for you because, granted, there's a lot of like wealth management companies and advisors and everything. I don't know anyone who's focused on MedTech execs. And so when you're, focusing on it, I was like, man, that's free money on the table. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I
know?
love it. I mean, it's exactly that idea of, well, you mentioned earlier about why you wanted to be in the business and change the industry. And it's really what attracted me to it. How can I serve people that are doing something I believe in that feels like it's actually changing the world for the better? And then I just get to take problems off their hands, which I think are hard and complex to solve. And I get really good at that one thing, which granted, I could do that for other industries, but the fact that I feel some passion behind what the clients we're serving is doing just makes my job a lot more enjoyable, frankly.
Yeah, and I think it's smarter too because like even though like somebody who's not at all like working with medtech execs, could they come in and do like wealth management? Of course they can.
Sure.
But the way people are is like they kind of want to deal with somebody who knows them,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's a smart thing. And just a small like note just for the audience, you know, so I have from a couple years ago, couple years back, a wealth management advisor that I use, and one of my best friends who's made a lot. Let's just say a lot of money,
Mhm.
like hundreds of millions of dollars at this point. When I talked to him, I was like, hey man, I was like, um, I need like make money advice from you. Okay,
Mhm.
like I can't keep like because he would invite me on trips and stuff. I was like, it can't be one way. Like I need and this is back before I started business and everything.
Sure.
And he's like, yeah, he's like, why don't you tell me what you do in a sentence? So I was like, okay, so I did it. He's like, great. He's like, nowhere in there did you say the word investor. He's like, you can't do this on your own. Like, you can invest a little bit in the stock market and into these start. I was like, you're not going to build wealth that way. You need somebody who knows what they're doing and who's going to
Sure.
manage this for you. And so it's the same advice I give to my friends. Like some of my, I have one or two friends who are obsessed with this. They love doing it. I'm like, they should do it on their own.
Yeah.
Everybody else, they're not interested. I'm like, work with an expert. It's like accounting. It's like, am I smart enough to sit down and learn how to do my books and do accounting?
Yeah.
Sure. It's a huge waste of my time. I'm never going to do it as well as my accountant. And so I'm better off paying a little bit of money and farming that out
So you can
because,
get to your one thing, stick to your one thing where you're going to make money.
that's exactly right. And it's like,
Yeah.
this concept of doing things on your own to save money is just such a dumb thing because
Yeah.
every day you have like a battery, right? And every day that battery gets drained.
Mhm.
Okay. You don't have infinite energy. Okay. Right. And so you shouldn't like there's some people I know that they're like, oh, I don't want to pay $100 a month for a pool guy or something or a yard man. I do it myself. I'm like, yeah, but like if you add that up, like you're dedicating what, like 5 hours a month to it.
Right.
That's like 60 hours a year. It's like you know that's it's a lot of time. So
That's an
people,
example of a lot of those pebbles you talked about, just
yeah,
too
man,
many pebbles, just like
yeah.
dragging you down.
Money, you can always make back money. You can't make back your time.
That's right.
You
Well,
know?
yeah. So on that point, as we're getting closer to the end here, I want to hear if you can summarize it. Well, let me rephrase. Let me start back. I know from when I started my business years ago, and from many clients who've started their business, they've expressed in so many words that if they had known what it was going to take, they might not have started the business. And I heard a little bit of that. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I heard a little bit of that if you made this kind of this leap. So if you were to go back and have the chance to start a business, jump from employee to business starting, anything you'd do differently?
It's a really good question. I would, but there's a part of me where the mistakes that I made were good and painful lessons to change me, to force me to grow. I think I don't know if I would, maybe the only thing that I would have done different, because I'm trying to think. I mean, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. Um, but I think the one thing that I think would have been the big domino was right now I'm in a mastermind group of entrepreneurs, and I'm paying like $1,500 a month. So it's not cheap. It's not going to kill me. Um, but that group has been so helpful. Not because we do provide like SOPs and strategy and stuff, but just to be around other business owners for the energy and the insight, like
Sure.
within that group, I put my ego away and I'm like, here's how much money I'm making, here's what I'm doing. And to get feedback from people in the group who are making a lot more money than I am, about like what to do and how to think about things and everything. I'd have a one-on-one with the main guy twice a month. Um, and I think like the one thing I would do differently is sought out that kind of help earlier.
Love it.
I
Yeah.
sought it out pretty quickly. Like I think it was 6 months in, but in some way I wish I sought it out a little bit earlier. And I think that people, what I often see with a lot of entrepreneurs is that you need some level of ego to drive yourself forward, but in some ways, like you need to put that aside and really pay attention to people. Like if somebody has a better business than you, and that means that either they're employing more people than you or they're making more money, they
Yeah.
probably have something that you're going to learn. And I think that it's important to take that on, because I see too many entrepreneurs, like there's a couple that come to mind that I tried to like give some feedback to and they just didn't want to listen, and they're making their own mistakes and paying for it now,
Right.
you know?
Right. Yep. That's
So
very good. I love it.
that's the only thing that kind of comes to mind, I think.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. What I think I heard is like, look, you can bootstrap yourself to a certain extent. You got to like work hard, like figure out the bricks, figure out your niche, whatever, but choose the places that you spend the dollars that actually matter. And some of those dollars may be on books, maybe on mastermind groups where you're actually getting real influence. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
And I think, again, like, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not running $1 billion business yet, but you know, you start a business and have the business take on the risk. Like me personally, my credit cards are paid off every month. My personal credit cards. My business is carrying some debt because there were some months I needed to use the business credit cards, and everything, and that's what they're there for. And every company, doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a venture-backed company or small business or anything, you need to learn to reframe how you look at debt and use it to your advantage, right?
Right.
And
Love
have
it.
a plan, right? So I think that's the other thing is, like, I think money, people's belief around money it really dictates a lot of their behavior if you think about
Yeah,
it. I can't
absolutely.
think of anything that drives more behavior and behavior change than money. And so to understand your relationship with money and how you feel about it, why do you think about it a certain way, is really, really important.
Yeah,
And so,
I
like, I
love it.
think, like, for myself, um, I'm doing very well. My health is great and everything, but partly because at what point, like, I was under a little bit of stress because I had some, credit card debt on the business I need to pay off. And because I hadn't separated it, it just felt like, oh, this is my debt, right? Not the business debt. Until one day, like, I can't remember what I was doing. I think the most important conversation you'll ever have is with yourself. So I was taking a walk and kind of like talking to myself, and I said one day, I was like, you know what? It's like JP Morgan Chase isn't waking up and saying, oh, Omar Khateeb owes us, like 20 grand. Like, why hasn't he paid this yet?
Right.
You know, so I think there are ways around it. There's a lot of interesting courses on, like, 0%. Like, there are 0%, 18-month 0% business credit cards you can get. You can start a whole business as long as you have a plan. You'll be fine, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
that's my own. That's
Use it
the
as
only
a
thing.
tool. Yep.
Yeah,
Choose
use it as
wisely.
it's a tool.
Man, love
It's a
it.
tool. We live in
There,
America, man. Like,
yeah,
this
there's
is,
so many different
like,
ways.
like, people forget. I'm like, well, I live in
Yep.
America. Everything's gonna be fine.
Right. Man,
So,
there's so many. I know we're coming on in a time here, and there's so many questions I have for you, Omar. I'd love to have you back sometime, and now that we kind of laid a framework, maybe get into just more questions around, like, how you advice for entrepreneurs, and maybe where you could make some better choices, and how these founders are launching and so forth. And so I'd love to have you back in the future.
absolutely. I'll give you. Can I give one more piece of advice?
Sure.
One more idea. It's an
Okay.
idea, which is, and I didn't learn this until later on in my career, but I think, one is, have some kind of plan about how you're going to invest. Like, automate something. Dollar cost average stuff. Just something is better than nothing. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
so when I was in my 20s, I didn't start, like, investing or doing anything, um because I was like, oh, what am I going to do, like, put a couple hundred bucks goes a long way if you compound it over time.
Sure.
So, like, something's better than nothing. But the other side of it is that, you know could you invest in the next hottest stock or something? Yeah, sure. But I think the most valuable investment somebody can make at any point in their career, especially earlier on, is an investment in themselves. Every year I tell people, I'm like, allocate, like, 5% of your, this is going to sound crazy, but, like, 5% of your income. Some years it was 10% for me of your income, where literally it's like, hey, I'm going to take this course, I'm going to go to this conference, I'm going to get some personal coaching. And the interesting thing about this, Matt, is that the more expensive the investment in yourself, the education, the more effective it is. So, like,
Right.
I buy, the average person, and this I saw this in my course. So my course, used to be under $1,000, right? The students who came in, they got okay results. Well, when I increased the price, magically, the quality of the students in there and their results got a lot better, because when you pay enough money and it's painful enough, like,
Yep.
you'll make sure that you make use of it.
That's right.
You know what I
That's
mean?
exactly right. Love it.
Um, yeah.
Well,
So that's
Omar,
that's that's a big thing for me.
I love it. Omar, where can we hear or find you? If we want to find out more about your influence and follow you, where's the best place to
Yeah.
start?
Best place I'd say is LinkedIn. I also am very active on Twitter and Instagram. You just look up Omar M. Khateeb and you'll find me. And then of course, like go check out my podcast, The State of MedTech. Give us 5 stars and write a review for the audience who's listening to Matt's show. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe, give it 5 stars, write a review. It's really important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Love it. Well, we'll get you back on the show at some point in the future. Bill, why don't you close us out today?
This is a great conversation. Now, I want to clarify one thing before we go, Omar. Your website, give it to us again.
Yeah.
You mentioned it early.
I mentioned it's khateebandco.com, and I'll spell it's KHATEEB as in boy, AND co. So Khateeb and Co, like Khateeb and Company.com.
Great. Because one of the things in my mind is, this is an ampersand or is it an and?
Yeah.
We'll make sure to add it in the show notes and
put it
so
in the
there'll
show
be links
notes. That's
there.
great.
Yep.
Thanks, Omar. Fascinating conversation. I look forward to you coming back on the podcast. That was great.
Absolutely.
Matt, we're going to wrap this up by, asking you how people can get in touch with you, folks who are listening and want to reach out to you. How do they do?
Sure. Yes. As always, start on our website. I think that's the best place. It's perspective6group.com, the number 6, perspective6group.com. You can always call us, 952-225-0333. Happy to talk to you. Like and subscribe to the podcast. Next episode, I think we're going to go back and meet Jacob, which we've heard from a number of times. But drop us a line, give us some ideas for episodes. We've got a lot of ideas rolling around my head, but I want to do shows on things that are important to you as the listener. So you can drop us a line at mwapodcast.com, MedTech Wealth Advisor Podcast. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You can drop us a line at mwapodcast@focusfinancial.com. So MedTech Wealth Advisor Podcast @focusfinancial.com.
That's great. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. A good conversation. As Omar mentioned, by the way, for those of you who are listening who like this podcast, it would be great if you would share it with other people, help get the word out about the podcast. The other thing you can do that's really easy is, if you are not a subscriber, hit subscribe. That way you don't have to think, when did I hear this? Where did I hear it? You will be notified automatically when Matt drops a new episode of the MedTech Wealth Advisor. On behalf of Matt and everybody at Perspective 6, I'm Bill Tucker, thanking you for taking the time to listen today and reminding you that you can go out today and make it a really great day. Or not. The choice is yours. Thanks for listening.